talk about all these different styles, the T-bone, the muddy, is it through the electronics that they got their sound, or is it through what they do with the strings?
It's a combination of both, I'm sure. I mean, remember that Muddy was playing what he did acoustically.
Right.
You know, when
Lomax interviewed
when
him,
Lomax
that's right.
found him,
Yeah.
he was playing an acoustic guitar on a porch. Well, what Muddy did was go to Chicago and realize that these clubs were really noisy, really loud. And so he went and bought himself an amplifier and an electric guitar.
Yeah.
And then and nobody'd ever heard this stuff. And then Walter, you know, got himself a cheap dispatcher mic and plugged it into a 59 Bassman, you know. And I mean, all of a sudden, the stuff from the Delta, it was the same stuff.
Right.
But all of a sudden, it was thunderously loud.
Yeah.
To get over the din of these, these relocated juke joints,
That's
for
right.
lack of a better term.
That's right. Yeah.
So all of a sudden, this stuff is coming out of these amplifiers, and they've got this drummer, you know, Freddie Belo or somebody, he's just banging the crap out of these things. Man, it was intense.
Yeah.
Imagine being somebody that was relocated from Mississippi to Chicago, and suddenly here comes Muddy Waters and Little Walter and Jimmy Rogers and those guys, and all of a sudden they're playing the same stuff that they remember from back home, but now it's thunderously loud.
That's right.
It must have just been,
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Right. But it must have had that city energy too.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was the thing.
I wonder if there's a movement now, as you said, with Hendrix and the Wall of Sound and the Marshalls and now Muddy. I wonder if there's a movement now to go back and take some of that technology out and get the tones from your fingers more so.
I wish that was the case.
Is that something that you maybe search for?
No, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. No, man. I've spent enough time trying to, as I said, distill all these styles into something that's my own.
Yeah.
And that involves, you know, I played in a lot of different formats, and I've found that the triumvirate of the trio is the powerful way to go. And I do use the electronics, but I try to use it to my advantage.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm getting the sound out of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't really, I think there's plenty of people that are doing the retro thing, and hopefully that'll keep all this stuff alive. We'll still have some guys like, you know, I mean, Mooney is still more like Sunhouse than Sunhouse.
You're right.
To me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just, John Alex Mason.
Oh,
great. Isn't he wonderful?
Oh, my God.
You know, here's a guy who really is going back to that.
Yeah.
Those guys will still do that. I'm going a different direction.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And that's the artistic quest, you know, at 41 years in show business to be, I don't know, chasing isn't the right word, but searching for that sound. And maybe you get close to it, and maybe...
I don't think you ever get it.
Yeah.
I think we talked a lot about Hendrix. I mean, Hendrix was always in this search. He heard something in his head, and he couldn't recreate it.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating to him.
Yeah.
We all have that demon, I think.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And that's, because I always wonder, like, when you're in a solo, and you are, you know, ripping through 5, 10, 15 minutes of the nastiest slow blues, it's just got people crying and what's going on in your head? Are you?
I'm trying to remember to breathe.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I you know, they talk about getting into a zone. Well,
yeah.
That's where, that is the trance. The trance is what you're searching for.
Right.
You're searching for the trance, because the trance, and we've seen Otis Rush do it. His eyes go back in his head, and he leans back like this, and he's there. And man, that's levitation.
Yeah.
That is levitation.
Yeah.
When he gets there, you can see the audience go like this.
Yeah.
It's just, the Neville brothers have done that to me before. I remember, you know, playing with them in New Orleans, and just literally feeling like I was astrally projecting or levitating or something. And it's like, yeah, you want to create that as many times as you can in your life. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's,
yeah. And as an artist, that to be in that trance
That's
is
it.
is where something I imagine magical comes, maybe channeled. It's I think of me as a writer. Sometimes I sit back after I've written something and I go, where did that come from?
I couldn't have written that. That's got to be somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you-
here's a perfect example. Decided to cut a remake of The Messiah, Roy Buchanan's Messiah.
Okay, yeah.
Now, Roy and I were friends. I mean, we knew each other. We played together some. Roy was a very spooky guy, as we all may know. Very strange fellow. Very sweet, but kind of, in a different world. Got all the rhythm tracks done on that track and went in, and I had never actually played that song from one end to the other before. Just kind of fooled around with it a little bit. But we got this great rhythm track. I figured, well, bit by bit, I'll knock it out. They turned that deck on, man, and I knocked that thing out in one take, and I began to realize about halfway through it that it wasn't me playing it.
Yeah.
I don't know who it was. I don't know if I know this sounds ridiculous. I don't know if it was Roy. I don't know if it was maybe my tinfoil hat was working really well that day. I don't know. But somehow or other, I did the whole thing in one take. And I realized about halfway through that it wasn't really me doing it. And that was a little scary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when the playback came back, I went, I'm going to have to go outside now.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. Has your solo career given you the opportunity to achieve more of these moments?
Yes, yes.
As opposed to when you were with the Assassins or with the Nighthawks.
Yeah, and it's really about the Hawks had a great chemistry.
Yeah.
A four-man chemistry, and that in itself. I used to call that moment the runaway train, when all four of us were in the zone.
Yeah.
The runaway train was in motion.
Right.
It was something you couldn't stop. But the Assassins never got there. We had some wonderful musical moments and some great times, but it was never something. We were always splitting up the spotlight and splitting up the ability to. Too many guys splitting up the ability to be the center of attention for in any given time. When I got, like I said, the triumvirate of the trio, that the power of three. That's where I was able to go. Okay, I've got this guy back here, and I've got this guy back here. So I'm fueled. I've got my engine. Now I'm driving.
Yeah.
And I'm going wherever I want to go.
Right.
And I think you get more opportunities to find that trance,
Right.
or that zone.
Right. Does being with a trio, it must put more responsibility on you.
Yeah.
To cover rhythms. Everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But see, I learned by sitting in front of Bobby Radcliffe when I was a little boy, I'm a little teenager, watching Bobby.
I just got his new CD today in the mail.
I bet it's killer.
I haven't played it yet.
I'm sure you're going to love it.
Wow.
But the first thing I noticed about that guy, besides the fact that he could do Magic Sam better than Magic Sam, was that he played as though he were two guitarists. He played the lead and rhythm almost at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was the one thing I got from him that I have held on to ever since. And when I got the trio together, of course, I could reach back and find that.
Right.
In all the other situations, you were either playing rhythm or you were playing lead.
You're lead.
Or you're playing rhythm or you're playing lead.
Yeah.
When you get to the trio,
Right.
oh yeah, I remember now. I go back and get the Bobby Radcliffe quiver out of the
That's right.
arrow out of the quiver.
Yeah.
And now I can do that.
Sure. You're most known as a guitar player, for your guitar approaches, styles, techniques, but you're also a great songwriter. How do you do as a great guitar player, is it hard to write lyrics or write songs to go with all these various guitar styles?
I once said to Jim Gaines in a studio during a recording, I said, Burford, really, I'm not I'm not a singer or a lyricist. I look at vocals as something to do between solos.
Solos.
The guy fell out of his chair. He's still talking about it. to
Yeah,
this day.
yeah.
I never really used to think about it all that much. It has been something that I've paid a lot more attention to in the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think writing with Pro Tools has helped me do that.
I know you told me a couple of years ago, was it True Stories?
Yeah.
When I did a little interview with you, you had gone to Nashville to work with Gary Nicholson
Right.
and
Learned a
learn
lot
the
from
craft.
him.
Yeah.
Learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
Excellent songwriter, and watching him hone that craft and use that ability to just sit down and be a wordsmith. You know, Eddie Hinton told me many years ago. He said, "Songwriting's like anything else. It's a skill.
Yeah.
It's inspiration, but it's also a skill, and you
Yeah.
have to practice it like any other skill."
Yeah.
So I took that as gospel, and when I'm off and in the wintertime, I get up every morning, and I've got a work ethic about it. And if I get something, I get something. If I
Right.
don't, come back the next day and try it again.
That's right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, I look at it as a skill now, but I do try to, you know, the lyric part of it, I'm getting more comfortable with that.
Yeah. Would you say you practice songwriting then, the lyrical part more
You
than
do.
guitar? Yeah.
Well, equally as much,
Yeah,
I'd say.
yeah.
You know.
And what's a typical day around the house for Jimmy Thackery like? Are you
Get
like
up at
Jimmy with a
6.
guitar around your
Get up
going
at
in?
6, go in and start the drum machine.
Really?
Start that, start coming up with licks, start coming up with rhythm parts. By about noon, hopefully I've got something to write a lyric to.
Wow.
Go break for a while, try to write some lyrics.
Yeah.
Come back in the afternoon and knock out the bass parts and the lead parts and the vocals.
Wow.
And put that all together on Pro Tools. At the end of the day, right before dinner, if everything's going the way I want it to, I push the button, the thing spits a CD out at me, and I log it in my folders for later.
Wow. Wow.
And then
And
when the guys come around, I play them all the stuff and say, which ones do you like and which ones don't you?
So the workshopping of your songs pretty much happens at home,
Yeah.
and then you take them on the road to
I send these
road
guys.
test them, or
No, I send them a CD and say, look, this is what I'm working on.
okay, okay,
Which ones do you like and which ones should I trash?
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact is that not everything I write is conducive to being played by my trio.
Right.
There's some things that I just wrote. The very first song that I wrote, I gave to Earl Cate and his band.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just recently, and I think it's going to be on their new album. It was not something I wrote for a trio. It wouldn't work in a trio.
Yeah.
But it worked in a 4-piece, 5-piece band perfectly.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
At one point it was, I shouldn't write songs that I can't do it in the trio. Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You got to be able to write any kind of song.
Right, and that's going to make you a better writer in the
Right,
long run.
right,
Just
right.
like all the guitar styles that you now, can play,
Right.
makes you a better guitar player.